Melted Ice Cream by Pauline Kael from The New Yorker, February 1st, 1982, republished in Taking It All In. There are easily recognizable danger signs. When a director announces that the movie he is working on is ahead of its time, you can guess that he's in deep trouble because what he's saying is that the public won't know enough to appreciate what he has done. When a director announces that he is becoming a film composer, you know he's saying that he doesn't have much in the way of a story or characters. When a director says that his movie is about fantasy and reality, you suspect he's carrying on in the ringmaster tradition of Fellini. When a director starts talking about his revolutionary video film technology, you squirm because you're not sure you understand what he's saying, and the parts you do understand make you squirm even more. Put it all together, and it spells Francis Ford Coppola's One from the Heart. This movie isn't from the heart, or from the head either. It's from the lab. It's all tricked out with dissolves and scrim effects and superimpositions, and even oral impositions. There's a song track with Crystal Gayle and the growler Tom Waits telling us the meaning of what we're seeing and wailing words of wisdom. One from the Heart is like a jeweled version of a film student's experimental pastiche, the kind set in a magical junkyard. There's nothing under the devices but a hope of distilling the essences of movie romance. And so even when Coppola hits on something eerily charming, such as an image of Nastassja Kinski as a Las Vegas showgirl wriggling for the customer's delectation inside a huge neon-outlined martini glass, he doesn't tie it into anything. It's there simply because Coppola thought of it and was able to do it. You get the feeling that the movie grew by accretion, that he didn't think out the character relationships, but simply piled visual ideas and comedy bits on top of the small story he started with, until the movie became so jewel-encrusted that the story practically disappeared from sight, and the movie turned into something like a poet's salute to the banal silver screen. Coppola and his studio resources are always present in this film, in the same way that Fellini has become the star of his movies. And people in the audience at Radio City Music Hall, where the film had 2 sold-out previews on January 15th, applauded the swooping in and pulling back camera movements, and the special effects, and the pretty painted scenery representing Las Vegas. Just as audiences at stage plays sometimes applaud the set or the costumes. Visually, the film has the kind of stylization sometimes seen in the dance numbers of MGM Technicolor musicals of the 40s and 50s, a deliberately artificial glow. It is studded with references to other movies, and the whole thing might be regarded as a giddy, unimpassioned variation on Scorsese's New York, New York, which was set in the 40s and employed a stylized studio look, though the actors talked in a semi-improvisationary 70s psychodrama manner. One from the Heart takes place in a studio-made Las Vegas, heavy on the neon and painted skies, and is set in a timeless present, with casual throwaway dialogue. When a director becomes the star of his movie, when his devices are chuckled over and applauded, the audience is, in a sense, applauding its own knowingness. and because it's a knowing audience, it expects a lot. The chuckles are anticipatory, eager. They don't last as long as One from the Heart does, because eventually the audience realizes that there is nothing, literally nothing, happening except pretty images gliding into each other, and you can hear people saying to each other, "It's a pastry chef's movie," and "I didn't know Coppola had become such a dingaling." It's easier to get by with an empty hat in the context of Vietnam than it is in a metaphorical Las Vegas. In this fantasy land, Hank, played by Frederick Forrest, the stick-in-the-mud hero, is a partner in a junkyard business called Reality Wrecking, and the heroine, Franny, played by Terry Garr, who has been Hank's roommate for the past 5 years, works at the Paradise Travel Agency. But she has never been anywhere. It's the 4th of July, Independence Day, and Franny, bored with Hank, walks out on him. The holiday is treated like Mardi Gras, with crowds dancing through the streets that the art director, Dean Tavouleras, has designed. All that day and night, the film cross-cuts between Hank and Franny, or they physically crisscross or go past each other, as Hank becomes involved with the showgirl, and Franny takes up with a singing and piano-playing Latin waiter, played by Raul Julia. Hank has a partner and confidant, played by Harry Dean Stanton, who looks tan and wiry and shows glimmers of a subversive sanity. Franny has, as her partner and confidant, Lainie Kazan, whose décolletage is overpowering, but who has a frantic, funny routine talking about the horrors she goes through on dates as she dashes off to another one. Essentially, that's the cast and the story. These 6 flit about on the street set. Everything seems to be happening on a large stage, as in fact it is. All we're asked to care about is whether Hank, who's in love with Franny, will win her back. Or rather, this story being negligible, what we're asked to respond to is Coppola's confectionery artistry. Some artists become Jesus freaks. Movie artists are more likely to become technology freaks. In interviews, Coppola has talked about directing from inside a trailer while watching the set on video equipment. The movie feels like something directed from a trailer. It's cold and mechanized. It's at a remove from its own action. The 2 main characters are always talking to each other through glass or when the other isn't there. Coppola seems more fascinated by reflections of the actors than by the actors themselves. And the video editing techniques that he uses seem to destroy the dramatic definition of the scenes. Everything runs together. The movie is like melted ice cream. When the Mardi Gras crowds are milling about in the streets, there's no excitement, the kind of energy that can be built into a sequence by conventional editing methods has been replaced by bland fluidity. The technique is self-canceling. The most virtuoso effects, the ones that should reverberate with all the romance of the movie past, liquefy and are gone. Afterward, even your own thoughts seem to come to you by remote control, and a day later the picture is as blurry in the mind as the memory of a psychedelic light show. Some directors have begun to use video as a tool for keeping track of the continuity and for other subsidiary functions. But Coppola has got to the point of talking as if the video equipment itself would direct his movies. It's almost as if he'd got beyond directing, as if he has to make it more of a game by complicating it and putting technology between the film and himself. The most you can say about One from the Heart is that it's pretty. because, even at its loveliest, the imagery isn't expressive. The effects don't have any emotional meaning in terms of the characters, and so they don't mean anything to us either. Coppola has found a way to shrivel movie magic. One from the Heart is like a visualization of Warhol's Everything is Pretty. Looking pale-eyed, Frederick Forrest is on screen too much for the little he's given to do, such as a half-grin of dumb pleasure when Franny talks about how, when they met, she didn't expect to like him. Mostly, Hank mopes and chases after Franny, calling her name plaintively. And in the sequence in which he demonstrates his love for her by singing a song from the heart, he's so maudlin you'd think it would confirm her in her decision to split. Forrest has been lighted by the cinematographer Vittorio Storaro, who also shot Last Tango in Paris, as if he were Brando in that picture. At home, with part of his face in the shadow, he looks like a serious, deeply exhausted man, a Roman emperor in his last days, until he opens his mouth and talks like a sheepish, dumb slob. Terry Garr is nippy and speedier. From her first movie roles, she has seemed to be a likable funny face, a cartoon of herself. She's certainly not like anybody else. She's so slender here that she seems weightless, and she wears perhaps the wispiest wardrobe ever assembled for a movie heroine. She's always slipping in and out of her teddies, or some other bit of gossamer, and when she dresses up for conquest, she puts on a sleeveless, practically dressless red dress and spike heels. Dancing a brief tango with Raul Julia, she puts her spikes down very firmly, like a confident, hot pony. But she's spiritually weightless too, and Hank's suffering when he loses her seems overscaled. The people in this movie are charming but not interesting. Nastassja Kinski seems intended to be the spirit of something, of Vegas perhaps, or of romance itself. I would love to have a tape of Coppola explaining the role to her. She's not only a Vegas showgirl, she's also a Fellini-esque circus girl, an acrobat. Her scenes are the least enjoyable because she has no personality, but they're not painful because she is very diffident and very lovely, a sad young vamp, slightly worn. The childlike dewiness that carried her through other roles is gone. Coppola has put a veneer of lacquer on her, and she smiles her big empty smile as if she were visiting from another planet. She poses and cavorts on the hood of Hank's car and walks a high wire in his, yes, magical junkyard, which recalls Cyberberg's set in Our Hitler. Her dialogue is flossy babble, in which this junkyard reminds her of the Taj Mahal, but her blasé innocence protects her. Flat-voiced, she seems to be saying lines that she learned without finding out what they meant. The sets and the story suggest that we're going to see a musical, and that is how the film was described in advance publicity, but the nearest it comes is in its allusions to Saturday Night Fever and Flying Down to Rio and other musicals. There are no singers or dancers in the cast. I think that Coppola thinks it's a musical, or at least a musical play, or a fable without music, as he has also called it, because of the way the scenes slide into each other. It could be popular with kids who grow up addicted to video games, and they could use it to get high on, the way others have used Fantasia. But except for the grace of the images and the amusing edge to the acting, it's like South Pacific without the music, and Coppola must have felt that this didn't quite do the job. Hence the song track, which, like the narration, in Apocalypse Now seems designed to plug the holes. The belly-aching songs, Waits wrote them, become as draggy as Richard Baskin's songs in Welcome to L.A., and when you can understand the lyrics, that's when it's worst. The set does have a wonderful grandiloquence, like a child's vision of a World's Fair of the past, or something from one of those static English fantasies, such as Stairway to Heaven. But Coppola hasn't figured out what to do with it, maybe because there's no particular reason, except the metaphorical one, for the story to be set in Vegas. The original script by Armin Bernstein was set in Chicago, and when Coppola rewrote it, he didn't do anything to tie the characters in to the changed locale. There's nothing under the tutti-frutti sweetness of the surface, except perhaps boredom and impatience. If the movie is slight and evanescent, it's because Coppola has begun to think of art as invention. He has begun to think like Edison, or Preston Tucker, the automotive design genius, whom he frequently talks about. The climax of the film comes, really, in the end title that proclaims, "Filmed entirely on the stages of Zoetrope Studios." Coppola has become so entranced by technical feats that he no longer thinks like a writer or a director, a man who can say, with the seriousness of a hypnotist, that new movie technology is going to make the Industrial Revolution look like a small out-of-town tryout, seems to have lost the sense of proportion that's needed for shaping a movie. The artist has been consumed by the technology. T.S. Eliot's "I can connect nothing with nothing" has become a boast. Jack Nicholson may still have plenty of surprises in him. In the unheralded The Border, filmed largely on location in El Paso, Texas, by Tony Richardson, Nicholson plays a United States Border Patrolman whose job it is to shove Mexicans back to their side of the Rio Grande, and he gives a modulated, controlled performance, without any cutting up. Except for his brief appearance in Reds, this is the first real job of acting that he has done in years. The film also marks a change in the work of Tony Richardson. He has a major muckraking subject, and he works to serve the material. Over the years, he has developed a considerable body of skills, and this may be the most unobtrusively intelligent directing he has ever done for the screen. It's a solid, impressive movie. Charlie, the patrolman, hates his work. It fills him with disgust because most of the patrolmen are in cahoots with the American businesses that hire wetbacks, and the patrolmen make their money, their big money, by closing their eyes to vans full of workers earmarked for their business partners. It's an ugly, corrupt life, persecuting enough Mexicans to keep the government bureaus happy while functioning as slave dealers. The trade sickens Charlie, but he gets caught up in it by the social climbing idiocies of his wife, played by Valerie Perrin. When he was an immigration investigator in the Los Angeles area, he had felt worthless and wanted to return to the Forest Service. But his wife talked him into transferring to the Border Patrol in Texas because she had friends there, and now she and the wives of the other slave dealers belong to a southwestern parody of upper-middle-class society. They shop for tight, bright clothes and decorate their gaudy dream houses, and the men wear expensive boots and cowboy hats and slap each other's backs at the barbecue parties held on the patios near the swimming pools. Charlie doesn't have the stomach for this camaraderie. If the loaded vans are discovered by any stray honest patrolman, Charlie's pals may protect themselves by jailing the passengers or getting them killed. Back in 1933, the picture I Cover the Waterfront caused a great stir by showing that, when the captain of a ship smuggling Chinese illegals into California ports spotted a Coast Guard vessel heading toward him, he sank his human cargo, chained to go down swiftly. With any luck, the border will cause a fuss too, because it lays out, very graphically, the essential irrationality of government policies, and the cruelty that develops out of them. Working from a script by Derek Washburn, Waylon Green, and David Freeman, and with the cinematographers Rick Waite and Vilmos Zsigmond, Richardson is able to encompass so much in the wide screen frame that he shows how the whole corrupt mess works. Charlie is a little like the hero of Kurosawa's Ikiru, who knew that he couldn't do anything big to fight the bureaucracy, but was determined to have one small accomplishment to leave behind. Charlie is so wasted and fed up that he tries to do one simple, decent thing. He wants to feel good about something. Among the Mexicans living in an encampment on their side of the Rio Grande and waiting to make the trip over, he spots a round-faced young Madonna who has come from a village devastated by an earthquake. Played by Elpidia Carrillo, a 20-year-old Mexican actress who suggests a dark adolescent Ingrid Bergman, she is clear-eyed and natural, the image of everything unspoiled, and the opposite of Charlie's giggly sexpot wife. She has a beautiful plump babe in arms and is accompanied by her younger brother. Later, she's in a group Charlie has to round up and arrest, and when she's in the prison camp, her baby is stolen from her by thieves working in collusion with the slave dealers, who arrange for infants to be sold to childless couples. Charlie tries to help her and her brother make it over the border safely in one of the vans, but things go horribly wrong, and she is injured and the boy is shot. Charlie can't help the wounded boy, who dies, but he's determined to restore the girl's baby to her. That's all he hopes to do. He has no designs on the girl. She represents an ideal of what people can be if they're not corrupted, and his belief in that ideal is about all he has left. It gets to the point where the only thing that can give his life any meaning is to reunite the girl and her infant. In order to do it, he has to fight his buddy in the Border Patrol, played by Harvey Keitel, and the boss of the unit, played by Warren Oates, and he goes through hell. Tony Richardson handles the large cast with apparent ease. Keitel is subdued and believable. Valerie Perrin, who has been giving disgraceful performances for several years, plays the dumb, tart wife to whiny perfection. And Shannon Wilcox, who plays Keitel's wife, a more confident tart, has a lifetime of teasing in her big smiles and swinging walk. There are also some very scary thugs, headed by Jeff Morris. Nicholson does his damnedest to make this muckraking melodrama work. Luckily, or maybe through shrewd calculation, he wears dark glasses in much of the picture, so we can't see if he's doing his trademark stunts with his eyeballs. Charlie is at the center of the story, the corrupted, conscience-ridden, self-hating American, wishing he could feel clean again. Maybe Nicholson hasn't yet regained the confidence or zest to be exciting, while staying in character, that he had in, say, The Last Detail, where he used his crazy smart complicity with the audience. But probably that zest would work against the conception of Charlie, who has to be spiritually beat out. The movie might have been disastrous if anyone else had played the part. Nicholson is completely convincing as a man who has been living in dung up to his ears, and so when Charlie feels he has to do something decent before it covers his head, there's nothing sentimental about his need. It's instinctive, like a booze-soaked man's need for a drink of water. Thank you for listening.